Viewer discretion advised. The following video contains real accounts of graphic violence, death, psychological trauma, and disturbing historical events. Some content may be deeply unsettling or inappropriate for younger audiences and those sensitive to topics involving murder, mental illness, and unexplained deaths. This video is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. If you are sensitive to such material or currently struggling with mental health issues, consider watching with caution or skipping this video entirely. The Hinterkaifeck Murders, a farmhouse of death. In the chilling winter of 1922, nestled in the Bavarian woods of Germany, stood an isolated farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. The Gruber family lived there, Andreas and Casilia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her two children, young Casilia and baby Joseph. They lived in solitude, far from town, relying only on themselves, their animals, and an occasional maid. In the weeks leading up to their deaths, something strange started happening. Andreas reported finding footsteps in the snow that led from the forest to the house, but none leading back. He also told neighbors he heard footsteps and whispers in the attic at night. Tools went missing. A newspaper he had never seen appeared on the doorstep. His previous maid had quit, insisting the house was haunted. Then came March 31, 1922. That day, a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived. It would be her first and last day on the job. That night someone, or something, lured Andreas, his wife Casilia, Victoria, and little Casilia one by one into the barn. Each was brutally murdered with a mattock, a type of pickaxe. Then, the killer entered the house and murdered 2-year-old Joseph in his crib, along with the maid in her room. But the horror didn't end there. For days after the murders, smoke continued to rise from the chimney. Neighbors reported seeing lights on at night. Someone had fed the animals, milked the cows, and even prepared food in the kitchen. The killer had stayed. Lived among the corpses. Slept in the beds. On April 4th, concerned neighbors investigated after noticing no one from the family had been seen for days. Inside the barn, they found the bodies of Andreas, his wife, Victoria, and young Casilia, all stacked under hay. In the house, they found the baby and the maid. All had been dead for days. The crime scene was gruesome but offered few clues. Authorities scoured the home. They found blood, yes, but no sign of forced entry. The farm's dog had been alive and barking. The murder weapon, the family's own mattock, was later discovered hidden in the attic. Rumors spread. Some believed Victoria's dead husband had returned from the war, driven mad. Others suspected a neighbor, perhaps the rumored father of little Joseph. There was also the disturbing possibility that the killer had simply been a vagrant, living in the attic for weeks before the slaughter. Despite a massive investigation and dozens of interrogations, no one was ever arrested. The murderer was never identified. The case remains one of the most disturbing unsolved mass murders in history. The isolated farm was eventually torn down. But the mystery of Hinterkaifeck, of a killer who may have lived with his victims before and after their deaths, remains a horrifying puzzle with no solution. The Silent Twins, a Pact Beyond Death. In the quiet town of Haverfordwest, Wales, identical twins June and Jennifer Gibbons were born in 1963 to Caribbean immigrants. From an early age, it became clear they were not like other children. They refused to speak to anyone but each other, creating a language so complex and fast only they could understand. As they grew older, their behavior became more isolated. They mirrored each other's movements perfectly, walked in synchronized steps, and communicated through whispers and glances. At school, they were bullied for their silence and race, pushing them deeper into their private world. Psychologists tried to intervene. Therapists, teachers, and even their parents could not reach them. They filled diaries with intimate thoughts and began writing novels filled with violence and twisted romance. Their fantasy lives became darker, blending reality with delusion. As teenagers, they became obsessed with boys in their neighborhood. When their affections went unreturned, they turned to petty theft, arson, and vandalism, setting a building ablaze simply to feel something. Eventually, they were arrested and deemed a danger to society, not for their crimes, but because of the unnerving psychological hold they had on each other. They were sent to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility typically reserved for the criminally insane. Inside Broadmoor, they remained inseparable. Staff described their relationship as parasitic, almost supernatural. When separated, each would become catatonic. They began to believe that only one could survive. Their writings hinted at a dark pact: if one died, the other could finally be free. In 1993, after 11 years in confinement, the twins were approved for transfer to a less severe clinic. As they were driven away from Broadmoor, Jennifer turned to her sister and whispered, "I'm going to die." Hours later, she collapsed. Doctors found nothing wrong, no poison, no injury. She simply died. Cause of death: acute inflammation of the heart, with no explanation. After Jennifer's death, June spoke freely for the first time in her life. Her stutter vanished. Her mental health improved. She described Jennifer's death not as a tragedy, but as an act of release. "We had a pact," she said quietly. "One had to die so the other could live." June still lives in the UK today, quiet but free. She writes, visits friends, and rarely speaks of her sister. But some who meet her say there's a sadness that clings to her, an invisible shadow from the twin who gave her freedom. Elisa Lam and the Cecil Hotel, a death in the water. In January 2013, Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old university student from Vancouver, Canada, set off on a solo trip to California. Bright, creative, and outgoing, Elisa blogged often about books, fashion, and her struggles with bipolar disorder. She checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, a place with a deeply disturbing past. The Cecil had been the site of countless suicides and murders. Two infamous serial killers, Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger, had once lived there. The building itself seemed to harbor darkness. But Elisa, unaware or unfazed, stayed in a shared room on one of the upper floors. In late January, she vanished. Hotel staff noticed she hadn't checked out. Her belongings remained in the room. Her parents, alarmed by her silence, flew down from Canada. The police searched the hotel and found nothing. No sign of a struggle. No clues. Then they looked at the security footage. The now infamous elevator video showed Elisa entering the lift. What followed was a disturbing display. She presses multiple buttons and waits. The doors don't close. She hides in the corner, peeks out as if someone is following her. Then she steps out, waves her arms erratically, seeming to communicate with someone, or something, unseen. Eventually, she steps out of frame, and the elevator finally closes. Days passed. Guests at the hotel began to complain about water pressure. Some said the water was brown, had a strange taste. Maintenance was called to the rooftop water tanks. When one was opened, the scene inside was unforgettable. There, naked and floating face up in the dark water, was Elisa Lam. The tank was sealed. The roof had a locked door and a ladder requiring a special key and alarm access. No fingerprints. No ladder inside the tank. Her clothes were found at the bottom, along with her phone. There were no drugs in her system. No signs of trauma. No injuries consistent with foul play. Authorities eventually ruled her death an accidental drowning. They suggested a manic episode led her to climb the tank and slip inside, where she drowned. But the explanations never added up for many. How did she access the secured roof? Why wasn't the water tank alarm triggered? How did she close the lid from inside? And what exactly was happening in that elevator footage? Conspiracy theories flooded the internet. Some believed she was being followed. Others thought she was a victim of supernatural forces. The hotel's dark history, combined with the bizarre nature of her behavior, fueled endless speculation. Years have passed, but the case remains one of the most haunting and inexplicable modern mysteries. A young woman vanished in a crowded hotel, only to be found dead in the building's water supply, her final moments captured in a video that continues to chill viewers to the bone.